Hello, welcome to the Weekly Review, a program of SSOA Network making sense of relevant topics and news. My name is Roger Alfred Yoron Mudi. I'm the producer and host. On Monday this week, President Salva Kiir issued a decree for expansion, reconstitution, and appointment of members of South Sudan Transitional National Legislative Assembly, TNLA. The Revitalized Agreement on the Resolution of the Conflict in South Sudan provides that the Legislative Assembly be expanded, reconstituted from 400 members to 550. The parties to the agreement, the former transitional government, to nominate 332, SPLM-IO 128, the SPLM-IO under Dr. Machar, and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, SOA, to nominate 50 members, other political parties 30, and former detainees 10. While the Revitalized Agreement says the functions and mandate of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly shall remain as stipulated in the Transitional Constitution 2011 as amended, unless otherwise specified by the terms of the agreement. The agreement also says that the reconstituted Transitional National Legislative Assembly shall, in the conduct of its business, support the agreement and enact legislation that enables and assists the transitional processes and reforms described in the agreement. The transitional reforms are many, of course, including reforms and enactments of laws to do with transitional justice, issues to do with corruption, legislation on economic reforms, land, and the permanent constitution making process, and so on. Joining us today is Jacqueline Nasiwa, an experienced international lawyer, activist, rule of law specialist, and peace building expert. She's the founder of the Juba-based and national non-governmental organization in South Sudan, the Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice, CIGPJ, working on gender inclusion, peace building, transitional justice, access to justice, civic engagement, and so on. She holds a master's degree in international law from Oxford Brookes University, United Kingdom. We will be hearing her reaction on the appointment of the members of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly, and also the expectations, since he's also involved in the peace process. We also were expecting to have Dwok Chakwol, an analyst and writer who was supposed to be on the show today, but we will get him in the middle if he comes. Nasiwa, welcome to the Weekly Review, and we start with your reaction from what has happened on Monday. You're on mute. Can you put on your audio? I'm not hearing you.
Hello, Rogers.
Yes, I can hear
you. Are
you.
You hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger, and our network and the listeners of SSOA and the South Sudanese community outside. Yes, we have seen the appointment of the reconstituted members of the Transitional Legislature. We have been following keen on the adherence, at least the legislature and in the executive, and to the recent appointment all parties and the states. So in regards to the membership, we all know that South Sudan will have 550 members of parliament in the National Assembly. And out of these 550, at least 190 should be women. And breaking these 550, we look at the Intigon, which is the incumbent government. They have a percentage of 332 members of parliament. And 116 are supposed to be women. but women are given 95 out of the 116 that is in the intergonal. And then when we look at the SPLM-IO, which is in SPLM in opposition, they have 128 seats, which means women are supposed to be 44 at least, and they have given us 39. When you look at the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, they have 50 members of the parliament and 17 are supposed to be women, but they have given women only 10. And then you look at the former detainees, they have 10 members of parliament. We expect 3 to be women, and they have given women 2. And again, you look at the other political parties, they have 30 members of parliament, and we expect 10 to be women, but they have given women 6. In total, out of the 550 members of parliament, women are given 152 out of 190. That brings the percentage of women in the National Legislative Assembly to 28%, and that is not 35%. The government, which is the incumbent, has given women 28% if you calculate that percentage. The SPLM-IO has given us 31%. The SOA has given us 21%. Other political parties have given us 23. And the other opposition parties have given us 21%. The former detainees have given us 23%. So that means all the parties to the peace agreement have not respected what they signed for in the agreement, which is the quota given to women. And this is already a very bad trend, because in the executive, women have not made even to 25%. That is at the national executive. And then when you came at the state parliament, women only make up to 16% in total. So that means women's representation is still far from being achieved in South Sudan. And when you look at the list, some people will say, oh, some states have given us more. We have 40% in state A and state X. We have this number of women, but you look at the list itself, it doesn't speak to what is being said outside here. So women's representation in this parliament has been low, and we're expecting that much as women lost in the executive in both national and state, at least they could compensate women in the parliament. And that has been missed opportunity for us as women of this country.
Well, of course, we don't know, you people who have been advocating for... You people who have been advocating for the rights of women, I don't know what steps are you going to take regarding this with the parties for the violation of the 35% given to the women. But other reactions, what other reactions do you have as far as the appointments are concerned? And also maybe tell us steps that you may take to pursue.
Yeah, in terms of our reactions, in terms of our reaction as women, we condemn this kind of violations of women's right to participate, because this right is enshrined in the peace agreement, in the constitution, and South Sudan has also signed some of these international instruments that guarantees women's equal representation in peace processes and political processes. And that includes the UN Security Council 1325, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Kampala Declaration, and also the African Charter on Women's Rights, the Maputo Protocol, and CEDAW. So this is total and complete violation of that, and it shows the lack of political will by the political parties, including even parties who have called for reforms, and they are not able to adhere and respect the women's representation. Yes, some parties claim that women are not in their political parties, but that is not completely right. There are parties that we have seen, they are the major principals and major parties in this country, and they have women. So if the smaller parties can complain that they don't have women, At least the big parties should not have an excuse to say that we don't have women. This is a challenge. The other one is that we will not stop from advocating for women's political participation, because women are stakeholders in this country, and also we are stakeholders in peace building. We have seen good examples of countries that have included women, and the women have contributed immensely in the development of those countries. So South Sudan is not unique that women have to be left out because we are in a situation of conflict and we are trying to contain security. This is not right. And we are going to follow up with the parties individually to speak to them, and also to have a conversation with them that what has happened is very wrong, and they need to consider women, because without women, we cannot move further. Women are the majority in this country, the largest population. And if you talk of the youth, we have very many young girls who are youthful. So leaving the majority of the country behind is not taking South Sudan anywhere. And we are going to do more of awareness at the community level for more women to know their rights, and for women also to advocate for their equal representation at all levels of government.
Well, beyond the women, there are also issues of the reforms stipulated in the agreement, since they are part of the peace process. And you in the civil society also, what are your expectations? What are your hopes as far as the tasks and the mandate of the Transitional National Legislature that has just been reconstituted are concerned? You have issues of reforms, and here and there people are raising concerns about the issue that the appointments of the members, since they came through their party, some of the parties, first of all, are not registered parties, they're just parties within the context of the agreement, and some of them may register as far after the reforms that are to be done on the Political Parties Act. Some may not register, but the issue of security of tenure for parliamentarians, and the issue that the members came through their parties, they're not elected, but they came through their parties. Now, as far as the reforms are concerned, what are your expectations? What are your hopes? How are you hopeful that they will enact the reforms as required? Some people have already expressed doubts that maybe some may not be for the reforms as required.
Yeah, I think we need to give them the benefit of doubt. I also think that there is a lot on the plate for this parliament to do. You know, this is a parliament who had been in recess for 2 years. They were not even functioning, and there are many pending bills, as you said, including even the peace agreement. The amendment bill of the peace agreement is not yet passed by the parliament. And that is something which is very important and should be the top priority, because the peace agreement needs to be incorporated into the transitional constitution so that it becomes supreme law and guiding the processes that are leading to the transition.
That was reported. That was done, though some parties say there was alterations. Yeah. There were alterations on some parts, some articles.
No, it was not passed. You know, when you deliberate on a bill, it has to be passed. So deliberating on it with amendment without passing it, it doesn't make it a law. So Parliament has to pass it, and then the President has to assent to it for it to become the law. And here we still don't have the bill signed by the President, not even passed by the Parliament. Then they went for recess. So those amendments were made.
I think we followed that last year until when the SPLM-IO complained to IGAD when they said there were alterations made to the amendment bill, which was said to have come into force as an act. So there's already this general understanding that the amendment bill for the incorporation of the agreement was passed and assented to by the President, and that's why they formed the government. And all these are said to have been done as far as the news in the reports are done. But more than that, also the issue of the reforms that
I haven't.
The issue of the reforms, the issue of the reforms and the level of confidence or the benefit of doubt that we should give to the Parliament. You in the civil society, how do you see that coming?
But you know, if you are to adopt the incorporation or the bill incorporating the peace agreement, it has to be done by the reconstituted Parliament. which is this parliament now that we are talking of.
I
think when you
that one is not true. That one is not true. The issue of the incorporation actually were some of the tasks that were to be done during the pre-transitional period by the parliament that was in place before, not the current one, not the new one, not the Reconstitution one. So they were to incorporate the agreement to give it the legal force so that the new government would be formed, including but that one did not happen on time. Then they later did it late and so on. But our focus now, since the parliament is put in place, is reconstituted, the issue of the reforms and including the permanent constitution making, these are things they are mandated to oversee, including the making of the legislation. And the public trust.
Also, you carry the false information. You carry the false information and you give it out there to the public. And I'll say that for you, you need to get the bill and also put it out there that this is the bill which was adopted and signed. And for me, as far as I know, I haven't seen the bill and I know that it is not signed. The other thing is that this parliament is expected to do a lot of things. We have the security bills which need to be adopted. That is police, prison, wildlife, SSPDF, and the rest. And we have also the governance laws, which is election and political parties law. And you are right to say that these political parties, some of them are not registered, some of them come in the context of the peace agreement, but they are all legitimate parties. If you look at the parties that came from Khartoum, the South Sudanese parties from Khartoum, when South Sudan got independence, they moved to the south. And that does not mean they were not legitimate. They were just waiting for the process to get registered. And then we also have the parties that come within the context of the peace agreement, because the peace agreement is paramount. We are resolving a crisis in a country, and containing the crisis means you have to contain the parties who have taken arms against the government. So they are also within that context legitimate. And now what we need is to reform the Political Party Act and set up guidance on how these parties are going to be registered, how they are going to be managing their own rules, which will also include inclusion of the women's quota in each of the political parties. Because right now, the women who are in the party, some of them don't have decision-making in their own parties. They are not in the top executive of their parties. And it is good that the Political Parties Act is amended such that every party that wants to register should have that in these political spaces. The other thing is that we had been working without a budget. And now we have to set up a budget for the country. And Parliament's role in the budget oversight is very important, especially that we are working in an economic crisis where our country has lost a lot and our economy is literally very weak.
Well, just to also, are you getting me?
Yes, Roger, I'm getting you.
Yes, just to also be clear to our audience, I was referring to what have been there outside in the news and also what have been there on the record. When the amendment bill was said to have been passed, even the office of the president openly declared it. Even they announced the coming into force of that act before even forming the government last year, the executive arm of the government last year. So the Amendment Act is said to be there. IGAD even recognized its existence, and also IGAD the government made commitment to IGAD last time in one of the meetings in Addis Ababa, the Council of States, that they were going to rectify some of the alterations that the SPLM-IO complained about from the original bill versus the one that came out from the parliament and from the office of the president when he signed them into law. So that is there. It's just maybe there was miscommunication, or you didn't get about them. And then let's look at the issue of the issue of separation of powers. For example, the competencies of the legislature is very clear in the Constitution. You find the legislature is supposed to hold the executive accountable, to oversee the executive, and you find the issue of separation of powers between the three arms of government. Now we have some members of parliament that have been appointed in this new legislature, they are also executive. They're also members of the executive. Some are ministers and so on. What do you in the civil society say about the issue of this conflict of interest? Because separation of powers was supposed to have not one person in these two organs.
Yeah, separation of powers is one of the strong, I could say, like check and balance for any government in this world. And without separation of powers, and then you cannot do anything and know that you are doing it wrong. And I think the public is right to cry that there is no separation of power between our parliament and the executive and the judiciary. But it's very important that if we are moving forward now with this current parliament, which is even too big, to manage, there should be some kind of separation of powers so that these people represent the voice of the people, of the citizens. But without that, we are likely to see that this parliament is likely to represent the voice of their political parties. We had the experience of members of parliament making decisions on the nation based on political caucuses. When there is a serious issue, they retrieve back to their political caucuses. And this has not unified them as a parliament that stands for the people and for the nation. So it's high time that they look at priorities of the citizens and look at issues of the nation as nation rather than tying themselves to their political party, which means like influence by their parties and the executive. And that weakens their position. So most people call them like rubber stamp, and they call them like they are just there for accommodation. But it's high time that this parliament prove that they are not there for accommodation and they are not a rubber stamp, but for the country and fixing things wrong.
There is the issue of the numbers in the parliament, because it's big, but the parties in the agreement, one of the provisions says the parties recognize that the high number of the members of the executive, of course, and then the Transitional National Legislative Assembly is agreed herein in the agreement on an exceptional basis for the purposes of the transitional period only, and that those numbers shall form no precedent or any prosecutor for the future. So there's that understanding that moving forward, especially after the permanent constitution making after the election, this is not the number that is going to be maintained. And then on that changing of this parliament into a constituent assembly, the agreement also says that the transitional national legislature shall be transformed into a constituent assembly on the first date of the 27th month of the transition for the purposes of adopting the permanent constitution, which it shall be dissolved. But then the body to do the transformation is the parliament itself, the transitional national legislature. So they are the ones to transform themselves. How do you see that playing out, given that they have been given the whole power to decide for themselves?
Yeah, this peace agreement is for a specific time frame. And then, as you said rightly, after this time frame, there's going to be a constitutional process. And this constitutional process will now define for us what type of government do we need, what structures of government do we need, how many states, for example, how do we create states, and then the electoral process will also develop for us like the constituency assembly. How many constituencies do we need for election purposes? And all this will be developed in the electoral law reform and also in the constitutional development process. And I think it's very clear, like the steps taken for development of this constitution. Once the and 27th month and pass the constitutional. That may have to go and your people, if they bring you back, they bring you back. Then in these constituencies are delimited, and then you have to go to your constituency. This time you are not representing your parties, but you go to bring, I don't see that as a problem there. So even if the number is reduced, by that time, these people will entrust power to their representatives.
And the issue also the fact that the executive arm of the government is started, or the transitional period is started by the executive arm of government earlier, and then now the legislature is reconstituted later, 1 year and some months. You find the agreement was of the stance that the terms of office run concurrently. So as the civil society, what do you say about that issue of having the executive ahead in terms of time and then the legislature behind, including the fact that also some reforms that were supposed to be conducted within maybe 2 months, 3 months of the transition and so on, they did not occur actually because the legislature was not in place. So in these two scenarios, the issue of the legislature coming late and also the future, because they're supposed to have the same scheduled timeline.
Okay, Mudi, you know, we are implementing a peace agreement that is very straightforward, but the process has been made very complex. One thing is that even the executive itself delayed for a year for it to be formed. And the question which was asked was, when does the transitional period start? Because we had the pre-transitional period extended and extended, and then we had the transitional period supposed to start immediately. Does it start with the formation of the executive, or does it wait until the parliament is reconstituted and then we start counting from there? And that is a question that is left now to IGAD and to the RGMEC, which is the monitoring body, and the parties to clearly define when is the transition period starting. Already there are discussions about elections, and already also there are discussions about the mandate of this Article expiring in the 3.5 years, which is few months to go. And then there were calls for extension. And for us as civil society, we keep asking, you want it to be extended. How long have you extended it? And what are the key benchmarks that you want to see in the new extension of the timelines that you are asking for? You know, the peace agreement is not only about the governance. The peace agreement is about the security sector reforms, which is chapter 2. It's about chapter 3, which is the return. It's about chapter 5, which is on transitional justice and the constitutional development process. So here we are talking about a transitional thematic area, which is chapter 1 on governance. And I think that is one challenge in the implementation of this peace agreement. So what about security sector reform? It's part of the transitional period arrangements. And that has not been also fully accomplished. And we cannot be talking about a transitional period now, starting with the executive and, you know, the parliament. And civil society had been pushing for the parliament to be reconstituted immediately, but this has also delayed. And we are leading a complex process towards implementing a peace agreement, which is very clear.
And on the issue of the hopes of the civil society and even the general public in your observation, because you have here issue of, for example, game of numbers. The parties, the opposition, they have certain percentage, the government has the higher percentage, in the parliament. The decisions, according to the agreement in the reconstituted transitional national legislature on matters pertaining those in the agreement shall be by consensus, and failure to that, there shall be by 2/3 majority of all members. That is as far as issues pertaining to the agreement is concerned. But then on issues that are not related to the agreement, they say by consensus and either by simple majority in lieu of consensus. So you can see the issue of numbers playing here. Hopes are based on what, when reforms are talked about, maybe the new, maybe understanding the issues before the war have changed when people were fighting. No, the issues during the war, whereby there was a lot of disagreements, but now is it like the parties have trust and confidence building that can be a basis for the hopes as the agreement is being implemented?
Yeah, I think the issue of reaching consensus is likely to be complex because we now have an expanded parliament. But I see that there is no much issue. It depends on how the politicians will play their cards and what objectivity are the parliamentarians basing their discussions on. You know, there are certain things, even if you are from the party, your conscience tells you that they are not right. So they have to be objective because they are an independent parliament that is trying to put things right, checking on the executive, checking on the judiciary, and vice versa. Those other institutions also check on their performance. So I could say that the parliamentarians need to be looking at issues of objectivity and putting South Sudan first, and then their parties, and then themselves, rather than me first, and then my party, and then the country last. So this is the challenge that we had. In terms of their reaching consensus, if you see, even if SPLM or in government has the majority, but the others are seen as opposition parties, and they also have equally the same ratio. So how do they build their political alliances within is what they have to take care of. You know, each party has to play smart politics of convincing, politics which are not militaristic this time. So you have to be attractive and work properly with others so that you can push your agenda. So I'll say that is what we leave it to the parliamentarians and to the parties who are there to make decisions for the country, for the best interests of the country, rather than their best interests and interests of their parties.
Well, that we'll be looking into that because already 332 members out of 500 for one party. That's a huge gap, a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And also, there's a problem with.
But you remember, some of those people in the 332, they were even in these parties which are currently here. You remember in 2015 when we had the agreement itself, we had members of the IO who were in parliament, and they were from the opposition. Mm-hmm. So even if you have them all in Integon, it doesn't mean that they are from the SPLM party. They came from different political parties, including the FDs, you know, the DCs, the SPLM DCs, they were there. The other political party alliances, they were there. So they were not all SPLM to worry me too much because the power balance is there, but it depends on how they create the alliances.
It's interesting you mentioned that, but then going deeper, you find it's true, even the agreement recognized the parties that were forming, that were consisting of that made up the transitional government at the time in 2017 when the revitalization process started until 2018 when the agreement was signed. So you find that is that recognition, including the SPLM-IO under Taban, was recognized as a party that was part of the agreement or the government in place. But then you can see they have been complaining recently. They have not been given their quotas, their shares in the government positions on the state's issues, and now even the MPs, they were not clearly recognized as a party. You find that has happened. But then more broadly on the issue of parties feeling like they have grievances or they are not given their share as they ought to have been given in the agreement, and then looking also into the issue of the power to remove, for example. This is something that the agreement left out. The agreement is silent on removal of MPs. It talks about the procedures for removal and appointment of the executive members, which the parties have the power to. But then after the parties nominate and then they are appointed, there is this gap. There is no issue of how a party can change a member if they want, or even is there a security of China for them, or if a position falls vacant, how the party is going to fill that. These are challenges that are there. And then when we look also into that issue of how the group of Taban is left out and all this, you find there seems to be some difficulty there and some reasons for people to be skeptical about the reforms that are going to be.
Of Parliament, I've seen some of Taban's party members. They are in the SPLM. Someone like Dr. Richard Muller is there, Alfred Ladugore is there, and others. But there were few, of course, there were few, but they are there.
But they were mentioned SPLM. They were mentioned SPLM, while in the agreement, it was SPLM-IO under Taban. It's a different party. Those are not the same parties as far as the agreement is concerned. The individuals are there, but the party is not recognized as a party as the agreement wanted.
Yeah, but you know, I'm not a politician. I don't support Taban either or SPLM, but we had the Arusha unification, and Taban himself in Juba declared they are unified to the SPLM. So which means the Arusha agreement was complementing what was missed out in the Addis Ababa peace negotiations by then. So by the unification, which means those formerly who left SPLM, they come back, and when they agree, they are integrated. And that's why I say we are leading a complex process of the peace agreement. But as far as I know, like there was a unification process that went on, and he declared himself. And I remember some of the members also protested, why did you join without our endorsement? So those are their political issues, but I know that they have the Arusha agreement picked on, and the Taban's party were part of the SPLM.
Well, we're heading towards the end of the program. Well, also in the news recently, when the issue, the state officials were being appointed, the Taban group came out and said they were left out, the party was, and so on. Anyway, in conclusion, your views, your observations on the hopes and what the people should expect from this legislature that is coming in, and what the legislature should be doing also.
To the host, thank you very much for hosting me for this important discussion on the appointment and reconstitution of members of parliament, and which is very important. And I think the views of the people outside are exactly what you are trying to ask here. And I will say that to the people of South Sudan, you now have a parliament, and you have members who are supposed to be your voice in this government and in this parliament to bring your issues. And I could say that you should reach out to them, speak to your members of parliament, raise your voices to them so that they can put your priorities in the parliament. And to the members of parliament, don't think that because you are appointed, you don't have a constituency to report to. You are still responsible for your constituency, and you are accountable to them. So let's work together, whether you are appointed or not, with the people, so that we are able to resolve the crisis and also meet the needs of the people on the ground. You have a big task as parliament to check on the executive and also to ensure that the peace is implemented in letter and spirit.
Well, Jacqueline Nasiwa, the founder of a Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice, thank you very much for being on the program.
Okay, thank you, Modi.